November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving in the United States. At the airport in Portland, a quiet man walked toward the ticket counter. He was dressed in a dark suit, a white shirt, and a black tie. Nothing about him seemed unusual. He carried a small black briefcase and calmly purchased a one-way ticket. The name on the ticket was Dan Cooper. The flight he boarded was a Boeing 727 operated by Northwest Orient Airlines. Its destination was Seattle. The flight would only take about 30 minutes. A short journey, routine, normal. But what happened on that flight would become one of the greatest unsolved crimes in history. After boarding, Cooper quietly took seat 18C. He ordered a drink, bourbon and soda. Then he lit a cigarette and looked out the window. To the flight attendants and passengers around him, he appeared calm, almost relaxed. No one on the plane knew they were sitting next to the most famous hijacker in history, because shortly after takeoff, everything would change. The flight from Portland to Seattle had only been in the air for a few minutes. Passengers relaxed in their seats. Some looked out the windows. Others flipped through magazines. It was supposed to be an ordinary flight. But in seat 18C, the man known as D.B. Cooper quietly reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small folded piece of paper. Then he signaled to one of the flight attendants. Her name was Florence Schaffner. When she approached, Cooper calmly handed her the note. At first, she assumed it was just a phone number. Passengers sometimes flirted with flight attendants during flights in the 1970s. She slipped the note into her purse without looking at it, but Cooper leaned closer and quietly said something that would change everything. "Miss, you better look at that note." She opened the paper. Inside were words that immediately sent a chill through her body. The note said he had a bomb, and if his demands were not met, he would use it. The flight attendant tried to remain calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she looked back at the man in seat 18. C.D.B. Cooper noticed immediately. In a calm voice, he invited her to sit beside him. Then he slowly opened the black briefcase on his lap. Inside, she saw several red cylinders connected by wires. A battery sat in the middle of the device. To her, it looked exactly like a bomb. Cooper spoke quietly and clearly. He told her he did not want to hurt anyone, but he would detonate the device if his demands were ignored. Then he explained exactly what he wanted. $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting when the plane landed. The instructions were precise. He wanted the money in $20 bills. He wanted the parachutes ready immediately, and he wanted the plane refueled for another flight. The message was quickly passed to the cockpit, and within minutes the pilots realized something chilling. Their plane had just been hijacked. Inside the cockpit, the pilots contacted air traffic control. The message they delivered was urgent. Their aircraft had been hijacked. The man calling himself D.B. Cooper was demanding money, $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting when the plane landed. Authorities in Seattle quickly began preparing. Law enforcement agencies rushed to gather the money. Bank officials worked rapidly to assemble the ransom. The cash was carefully counted. Every bill was photographed and recorded. Investigators wanted to make sure the money could be traced later. Meanwhile, the plane continued circling in the sky. Passengers still had no idea what was happening. Inside the cabin, Cooper remained calm. He spoke politely with the flight attendants. At one point, he even paid for his drink. But behind the calm appearance, One of the most daring crimes in aviation history was unfolding. After nearly 2 hours of circling in the sky, the aircraft finally approached the runway in Seattle. Night had already fallen. Airport lights illuminated the runway as the Boeing 727 slowly descended. Emergency vehicles waited in the distance. Police officers and federal agents watched carefully from the ground. Inside the cabin, the passengers still had no idea they had been part of a hijacking. The plane touched down smoothly. But the situation was far from over. A representative approached the aircraft carrying a bag. Inside was the ransom demanded by D.B. Cooper, $200,000 in cash. Along with the money came 4 parachutes, exactly as Cooper had requested. Once the money was delivered, he allowed the passengers to leave the aircraft. One by one, they stepped down the stairs onto the runway, confused, unaware of how close they had come to danger. But Cooper was not finished yet. After the passengers left, he gave the pilots a new set of instructions. He wanted the plane refueled, and he wanted to take off again, this time into the darkness. With the passengers gone and the ransom secured, the plane prepared to leave Seattle once again. Inside the nearly empty cabin, D.B. Cooper gave the pilots a new set of instructions. He wanted the aircraft to fly south toward Mexico City, but he had several unusual demands. The plane had to fly low, no higher than 10,000 feet. The landing gear had to remain partially lowered, and the aircraft had to fly slowly. These conditions were highly unusual for a commercial flight, but the pilots followed the instructions carefully. Shortly after takeoff, the plane climbed into the dark sky. Rain clouds moved across the horizon. Inside the cabin, Cooper began preparing for something extraordinary. He tied the bag of ransom money around his waist. Then he put on one of the parachutes. The flight attendants were ordered into the cockpit, and the mysterious hijacker was left alone in the cabin. Somewhere over the forests of Washington State, he was preparing to disappear. The aircraft continued flying through the stormy night above Washington State. Inside the cockpit, the pilots followed Cooper's instructions carefully. They had no idea exactly what the hijacker was planning. Behind them, in the empty passenger cabin, D.B. Cooper moved toward the rear of the aircraft. He carried the bag of ransom money, strapped tightly to his body. The parachute harness was secured. Rain battered the outside of the plane. Strong winds shook the aircraft as it flew through the darkness. Then something unusual happened. Inside the cockpit, a warning light suddenly illuminated. It indicated that the rear stair door of the Boeing 727 had been lowered. The crew immediately knew what Cooper was doing. He was preparing to jump. At approximately 8:13 p.m., somewhere above the forests below, the mysterious hijacker opened the rear stairs and stepped out into the night, carrying $200,000. After that moment, he was never seen again. When the aircraft finally landed safely, investigators immediately realized something unbelievable had happened. The hijacker was gone. Somewhere below the flight path, D.B. Cooper had jumped into the darkness. The Federal Bureau of Investigation quickly launched one of the largest manhunts in history. Agents searched the forests of Washington State and nearby regions. Helicopters scanned the mountains. Ground teams moved through thick forests. But the weather that night had been brutal. Heavy rain, strong winds, freezing temperatures. Many investigators believed Cooper could not have survived the jump, but no parachute was ever found, no body was discovered, and no confirmed trace of the hijacker appeared. Years later, a surprising discovery would add another twist to the mystery. In 1980, a young boy digging in the sand along the Columbia River discovered something strange: bundles of decaying $20 bills. When investigators examined the money, they confirmed something shocking. The serial numbers matched the ransom money from the hijacking. But even this clue raised more questions than answers. How did the money end up there? And what really happened to the man known as D.B. Cooper? More than 50 years later, the mystery remains unsolved.